Let's see if we call back the other way around. I'm just trying to reverse call here on Skype. We'll see if this actually works.
Okay.
This is the first time I've tried this.
Yeah. Good thing it's not live.
No, it's a good thing, too.
Hello?
Is Chuck Swirsky there, please?
Speaking.
Chuck, it's Mike Richards calling.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, is it okay to call now? I was expecting your call. We're just calling on Skype. Do you want me to call back?
No, oh, you want me on Skype?
Yeah, no,
Wow.
we're on right now. I'm just using that as a service. Do you want us to continue on, or do you want me to call you back?
No, this is great. Let's do it right now.
Okay, perfect. Chuck Swirsky joining us here online. You just, for those watching on the dedicated YouTube channel, you just saw some moments with so Derrick Rose, and I guess, Chuck, number one, thanks so much for joining us here today. And sort of looking at some of those Derrick Rose highlights, it's a difficult story, I would think, especially for Bulls fans, knowing that there was a young man, a real bright future, and it just didn't really seem to happen for him. He's moved on to the Knicks. What is your take on Derrick Rose? Are we talking about a player that will still reach the potential that many think he has, or what's your comment on Derrick?
Well, I mean, my comment on Derrick was I think NBA fans were treated to an extraordinary talent when he got in the league. Obviously, Rookie of the Year, MVP, the youngest ever in the history of the NBA. And as you know, with the ACL injury, then the MCL, and he's really never been the same player. I mean, I know his passion and love for the game remains at a very high level, but, the body, in order to play in this sport and play near a full season of 82 games, your body is a work of art. And unfortunately, with that ACL injury coming, and then, simultaneously, almost when he returned with the MCL injury in Portland, his career, he's still a good player in this league, don't get me wrong. But will he ever be an MVP-type player again? I would have to think with the type of injuries he has, that's probably a long shot.
Yeah, it just seemed so sad because, at times, I mean, these are really young guys, Chuck, as you know. I think people sometimes, they're pretty harsh on some of the words that come out of their mouths, and sometimes it's just maybe a lack of maturity. But when he started talking about, I think it upset some fans and players when he talked about the longevity of him walking as a grandfather with grandchildren. Is that misunderstood? Was that just a young guy sort of looking down the road, and maybe upon second review, he maybe should have kept that to himself?
Well, I mean, I don't know, looking at that quote, and I was not there when he spoke that, but all I can tell you is he probably, what was in his heart and what came out of his mouth might be two separate things. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times we even do that in our profession, and we are paid to do this for a living, where we're thinking about it, and all of a sudden in a split second, we put the wrong words together, the nouns, the verbs, the thought process. And I'm not giving him an out, although it sounds like I am. But I just think that, he was speaking probably from the standpoint that he didn't want to be arthritically crippled at the end of his career. But it didn't come out that way. But, I think everyone kind of, took a hard look at it. But then as the season progressed, unfortunately with injuries or him holding, back a few games to rest his body, I think people started to take notice of the fact that, we're not looking at a player that we once were.
Chuck, we're about 24 hours from finally Game 1 of the NBA Championship. It seemed like it was a very, very long break for me, personally speaking. When we look at this series itself, what will it take for the Cavaliers to be successful and win yet another championship? I know the odds makers in Vegas are calling the Warriors to win this, but I want to look at it from the Eastern Conference Championship side of things. The Cavaliers win this series if...
Well, the Cavaliers win the series. They don't need enough. I mean, Golden State, we know what they can do. They're capable of doing. I still have question marks about their defense at times. But, when it's all said and done, I think people are kind of cavalierly, no pun intended, tossing Cleveland's chances aside. And, I mean, every team has flaws, even Cleveland and Golden State. But these two teams proved over 82 games of the playoffs that they withstood the test of a marathon, and it is a marathon. And I think for people just to brush aside Cleveland saying, well, look at Golden State, look at the margin of victory, and look at all the players they have on the floor. Well, you know what? I mean, Cleveland has the best player on the floor in LeBron James. And LeBron James is playing at such an incredible, incredible level. And I think these Cavalier players are riding the train. And, in fact, some are taking their own train. And we're talking about Kyrie Irving, who has been magnificent. I mean, Kevin Love's been great. I mean, Korver off the bench has been terrific. J.R. Smith is J.R. Smith. Tristan Thompson pulling for the kid. I love the kid as much as I love Steph because they played in Canada. But, you know, the bottom line is I think people need to kind of take a deep breath before they're already handing out rings to Golden. It's 27-2.
We're in conversation with Chuck Swirsky here on rawmike.richards.com. And, you know, Chuck, it's interesting to bring up Tristan Thompson. You know, we talk about some of our Canadian kids. Next week, I'll probably be talking to Dylan Brooks, local kid who's obviously playing in Oregon, also along with Boucher. And I look at that. Hey, Chuck, that Oregon team, if Boucher plays, and, of course, we had Leo Routens in last week, and you know his wife is a is a Tar Heel. So I said it was conceivable that the Oregon Ducks may have ruined the home life for Leo Routens had that changed that result for that game.
Well, I mean, listen, do we really need to bring Leo into the equation? Oh, my goodness. No, I love Leo. I'm only kidding. Leo, I'll tell you one thing. I don't know if YouTube goes back that far, but he was a great player. He wasn't a good player. He was a great player at Syracuse. And unfortunately, with the knee injury with the 76ers, had they had the type of technology as far as knee surgery and diagnosis of an injury to a knee, and Leo suffered a severe knee injury, had they had that back in the 80s as they do now, Leo would have gone on probably to play, X number of years in the NBA, but it's unfortunate that he didn't. But, I mean, we kid around with Leo a lot, and I know I did on the broadcast because I have so much respect for him. But let me tell you what, Leo at Syracuse was a magnificent player. But you're right, the Canadian kids, I'm so happy for them. And, my son, when we grew up in Toronto, played in a travel league against Corey Joseph and Tristan Thompson and Kelly Olynyk and Seth Curry. Not Steph. Steph was a little bit older. But, I mean, to see these kids and, with the class behind them and now the other class, it's great. I'm so happy for Canada. I'm so happy for the coaches and the parents that really said, you know what, this is what we want our young men and young women. And we want to put them in a sport that's growing, that's getting better, that has better coaching at the grassroots level. And I think it's fantastic. I really do.
And Chuck, it also lends itself to the conversation where, I mean, basketball has always been a worldwide sport, but the level that they're playing at now is just insane. I mean, I think it's why that, when you see a timeout and the 27 assistant coaches come on with all the chairs and all the players get to bail, I just wonder if there's some interpreters in there somewhere, because you're talking about a starting lineup that literally could have 3 to 4 different languages, once you get out there. I mean, it is a different world and truly is as global, maybe more global than it's ever been.
You're right. And and it's growing, Mike. I mean, we are going to see in the next generation kids, not only as we're seeing more players come in from Africa, but I'll tell you what's an open canvas right now, and the NBA is on top of it, and that is India. It is so popular, the sport of basketball in India, and it's growing. And Adam Silver deserves a lot of credit because he's a visionary and he understands what's going on globally. And you mark my words, in the next 20 years or so, we're going to start seeing kids from India play in the NBA.
That's interesting. Chuck, let's just rewind to a comment you were talking about with Mike about Canada and some of the young Canadian basketball players. How much of that influence, and with the Raptors being in the city of Toronto for about 2 decades now, and guys like Vince Carter coming through and almost being that generational player that the young kids look up to, how much of the Raptors and the Vince Carter influence are we looking at with some of these young players coming up today? Is that the reason for this Canadian influx of talent at the professional level?
Well, I think you have to look at the landscape first about from a demographic standpoint with Vince. Vince came to the Raptors during 98, 99. So let's say you're a 7-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid, okay? And let's put that 10-year-old kid back in 1999, in January of 99 when the lockout ended. Technically, February 6th was his first game. So let's say that's 1999. Well, that's what, 18 years ago. So that kid is 28, 25, and he grew up watching Vince Carter before he was traded to the Nets, obviously, and then start bouncing around. But, I mean, he is approaching his 20th year in the league next season. He will play 20, maybe even more than 20. But that young individual, the men and women who saw Vince Carter in 99 and then until he was traded, 2007, is that right?
Yeah, somewhere in that range, yeah.
2006, 2007, somewhere in that range. They grew up watching a man that did it every night in terms of abusing opposing players with incredible dunks, with three-point shots, with enthusiasm, electrifying plays. And I know his injuries started to, compile over a period of time in Toronto, and with his attitude where he wanted just a clean start because the coaching changes, front office situation, and it was not really conducive towards where he was entering his prime. But that kid bought into Vince. And a little bit of McGrady, but more of Vince. So then Vince leaves, and we have Bosch. And Chris really, I think, is a terrific player. I think he's going to the Hall of Fame one day. And so for a moment, it was Bosch. But as you know, fans love dunks, and fans love electrifying, spectacular plays. And so then all of a sudden, the Bosch era ends, and you got DeRozan, and you got Lowry. So right now, if you're 6th grade, 8th grade, high school, you may not really have a feel for Vince Carter as a Raptor other than watching, as we mentioned, YouTube, going back, maybe catching one of our broadcasts that are available somewhere, I'm sure. But right now, this generation is a DeRozan Lowry generation.
It's funny, you mentioned Chris Bosh, and sometimes, and I don't know why, like to me, he's not a polarizing figure in terms of whether you like or dislike. I always thought he was a very accountable young man. I thought that he each and every night he went out and tried his best with teams where he was obviously the best player, and yet sometimes I hear a disdain about his time in Toronto, and I'll be honest, Chuck, I don't quite understand that. I don't get that.
Well, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, Chris came in the league in 2003, and has never said, at least, I mean, maybe you can dial it up, but I don't think he's ever really said anything negative about Toronto or about playing in Canada. And I know that his rookie year, I became very close to him because he was underage and he couldn't get into clubs, obviously. And Bernie Augustine, who was, God rest his soul, our security person at the time, did a great job with Chris. And, Ray Chow, who was the massage therapist at that point with the organization, we went out a lot. And, I have so much respect for Chris. And you saw his personality really come to fruition when he joined the Heat with LeBron and Wade. And, I mean, his personality grew, but he really arrived as a man with the Miami Heat. But, again, whether it's McGrady, Carter, Bosh, during that period of time when I was there, I can't say one negative thing about any of those players because they treated the organization with respect, with dignity. I know issues, obviously, regarding management, coaches, whatever, but in terms of Canada, I mean, they truly enjoyed playing in Toronto. And why not? I mean, the Raptors, I was an employee, and I can say this now because I'm not an employee. The employees of MLSE under Richard Petty and Tom Anselmi, Larry Tannenbaum, were treated first class. I'm not only talking about players and coaches and organization. I'm talking about everyone. And they cared about us as people, not as a company. And so the players felt that. And I think that's why they really gravitated towards the organization, and that's why if you talk to McGrady right now, he'll tell you he should not have left Toronto. He thinks they could have gone to the finals 2 or 3 times. You talk to Vince. Vince loved Toronto, and I'm still hoping he retires as a Raptor. Bosch loved Toronto. I just think a great foundation for this generation as they're now benefiting from the fruits of Masai and, obviously Dwayne Casey and Rosen and Lowry.
Well, Chuck, I can tell you the people, they miss their salami and cheese. They miss their onions. They and I said, just listening to some of the calls that we heard before we got to your phone call. You're basically an honorary Canadian. I mean, I don't know if you feel that necessarily from the fans here, but I mean, you're very much missed, certainly in Toronto. But I would say Canada, and there is a real emotional attachment when we hear that voice. And is that something that you're aware of?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've been gone 9 years, and it seems at times like 9 seconds because of my admiration and respect. I did become a citizen in 2007, and I'm proud to be a Canadian citizen. And I wear the Canadian flag, and I'm a Canadian. Period. I love the United States. I love Canada. I have mutual respect for both countries. But my time in Toronto for 10 years was tremendous. And, I left obviously for personal reasons. And it was not anything to do with the organization or the city or anything connected remotely with the Raptors or the city of Toronto or the country. But looking back on my 10 years, it was great. And I wouldn't trade those 10 years for anything in the world, and I mean anything.
Well, Chuck, it's just wonderful we had this chance to spend the time with you, and again, it just brings back a lot of great memories, and as I said, Leo was in here the other day, so it kind of been back-to-back this week, some of our favorites, so we wish you the best of luck, and at some point, boy, we'd sure love to catch up with you again, but it's been wonderful here today, Chuck.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation.
That is Chuck Swirsky, the legendary voice, as you know, of the Raptors and, of course, of the Chicago Bulls. Also, apologize. I realize sometimes it says, how would you rate the quality of this call? You don't want to hear from me now, Skype.
What? We just become best friends? Yup.